Hi, my name is Abdulin Fahad, and my ICU summative presentation will be on parenting styles. So, my thesis question and hypothesis. So my thesis question is, how do different parenting styles affect a child's development? My hypothesis is that although outside influences such as friends and families will affect a child's development, at the end of the day, I think what will affect him the most is the parenting style. Now, there are four types of parenting styles: authoritarian, authoritative, permissive, and uninvolving. Authoritarian parenting is very strict. They tend to have a lack of show a lack of kindness to their children. Children, children who grow up are usually, they're not allowed to have a choice in family matters. So this ends up in the outcome of this is that the children become very aggressive compared to other children, or other children who grow up in this household tend to be very aggressive. They also end up being socially awkward because of the fact that the parents don't provide them enough confidence, and like I said, they lack self-confidence because parents usually try to motivate them through humiliation and shame, and this this results in them being less confident. Authoritative is another type of parenting. In this type of parenting, the parents, they show more attention to the children and more love and nurturance compared to authoritative is more, they show more love and nurturance in comparison to authoritarian. They allow their children to voice opinions, and they also put limitations and consequences, meaning they have rules and regulations, and the child breaks them, they are disciplined. If the child exceeds their expectations, they are rewarded. So this has very positive outcomes. For example, the children have they have enhanced social skills for later in life because the parents, allow them to be involved in family matters, and it helps their social development. There's very high self-confidence because instead of humiliating and motivating the parents by humiliating them, they motivate their children by showing kindness and love. And there's also a sense of self-control because there's rules and regulations, and they're brought up with these rules, and they know that if I violate a rule, I will face the consequences. So when they grow up, they get used to all these rules, and they get used to this concept, and they end up becoming more responsible adults. And this type of parenting is shown to be the most successful type of parenting because it balances punishment with reward. Another type of parenting is permissive parenting. In this type of parenting, what happens is parents are very easygoing with the children. They tend to show a lot of love to the children, but there's not much discipline because these type of parents think that if they discipline their child, they think that it's wrong to discipline the child because they have too much love for them. They may also act as a friend instead of a parent. Instead of an authoritative figure, they may act as a friend, and which this will really affect the child because it will give the child a lack of self-control because the child grew up with no rules. Less appreciation of authority because like I said, they didn't have any authority figure as they grew up, so it is less appreciation of authority. And also, this child tends to struggle academically because the parents provide no control for them. Uninvolved parenting. So in this type of parenting, the parents provide the children with little to no surveillance, no attention. Child is usually completely ignored except for the fact that they are provided basic rights like food, basic necessities of life like food, water, clothing. But other than that, there's really no nurturance and love. The outcomes are very negative. The children tend to have a lack of respect for their parents. They're emotionally withdrawn because they're not really involved with their parents, which is usually someone you should have the strongest bond. Parents are usually the ones that children have the strongest bond with, but as these types of children, since they have no communication with their parents, they grow up with being emotionally withdrawn. And this also leads to delinquent behavior because the children have no control, no one looking after them, so they end up doing this will lead to delinquent behavior as they reach adolescence. Now I'll explain different cultures and how they raise the children. so you can get a view of what type what type of parenting people do based on their cultural, influence. One is the Indian parenting. There's big emphasis on school. Most Indian parents will try to spend most of their money on their children's education, because usually in India, this is usually the ticket, the most common way they view education as a ticket to success. Obviously, and then there's also like parents will try to shape the child's life based on their religious rules and doctrines. Um, Children are disciplined in more harsh ways. For example, they get corporal punishment if they say they break the rules. Usually this involves spanking, so nothing that serious, but it's still more aggressive than Western culture. Um, Respect to elders is very important, so these children will be told to give their utmost respect to elders. So this means that even arguing with parents is seen as something very, very rude. And social life is practically non-existent if academics don't meet the expectations of their parents. Social life is non-existent, because parents will try to make their children focus on education more. Chinese, there was a lady, Chinese type of parenting. There was a Yale professor named Amy Chua who authored a book called Valheim of the Tiger Mom. She basically explained how she raised her children based on her Chinese parents, and raised her children based on Chinese methods of upbringing, and it sparked a lot of debate because it was very, very, very harsh. And in China it makes sense because Chinese children usually Chinese parents have one child, and all their attention and focus goes to that one child, and so Chinese parents usually have a huge emphasis on education because it's one kid, and they just give a lot of pressure to that kid to do well at school. Usually in Chinese culture, what they try to do is they try to tell their children that intellectual ability is not what matters. What matters is your effort. That if you put effort, hard work, you will get the grades that you need. And this is usually how Chinese parents will raise their children. Obviously, there's a slight difference in Amy Chua and an original Chinese parent, a Chinese parent from China, and Amy Chua is American. So, there's a slight difference between Chinese and Chinese American parents. I think the difference, it's a slight difference. Usually, I think it's basically the difference may be in how they discipline a child. Chinese parents may be more harsh. They may have corporal punishment and spankings involved, whereas Chinese American parents or Chinese people that are raised in the Western world won't have those types of harsh disciplinary actions. And yeah, you probably notice this is an authoritarian type of parenting. That's Amy Chua with two of her daughters. Now, I want to talk about Muslim parenting because a lot of immigrants that come to Canada are Muslim, and I think that this type of parenting is quite interesting compared to the way other religions raise their children. But the way other religions raise their children aren't really as radical or as don't differ to Western cultures as much as Muslims do. For example, Muslim parents, they view certain aspects of Western cultures with a negative connotation, with abhorrence, and they fear that their children may fall into Western habits, which causes the parents to impose strict rules to their children so that they don't fall into these habits. A lot of things that are normal to Western society are forbidden for Muslim children, such as drinking, partying, dating, etc., etc. Parents, they tend to be more authoritative. Muslim parents they're usually authoritative or authoritarian. It really depends on the parent. Now I'll just explain the Canadian method of parenting. Usually it's the same as Western culture. It varies from family to family. They're not all the same, but this is just typical Canadian family, how usually most Canadians view parenting. Academics aren't as seriously emphasized as other cultures because most Canadian parents want their children to explore their career pathways and have their own career pathways, compared to Indian and Chinese parents, where it's like you must become a doctor, you must become an engineer. It's not the same in Canada. Disciplinary actions are less physical and harsh. They probably limit to yelling or like scolding children. Also, things like dating, partying, drinking. It's appropriate. Canadian parents or Western parents see it as a more appropriate thing to do, whereas other cultures are they don't agree with this. Again, late night curfews. I think this is very common within Canadian parents, and within other cultures it's less common because like for example, for me personally, I wasn't allowed to go home and come back home at 12. I had to do it at 8. I come back home at 8. Whereas my peers, they would come back and they'd have their curfew would be around 12 or 1, and so it's very different. And they're more open to discuss about sensitive topics such as sex, homosexuality, stuff like that. Uh, and yeah, I just think overall this type of parenting can be seen as authoritative parenting. Immigrant families in Canada. When immigrant families come to Canada, I think that there's a clash of cultures because it's two different cultures meeting. Obviously, like mentioned before, there's a stress on the importance of sticking to one's culture and not adapting and being accustomed to Western cultures. Like for example, some some Indo-Canadian families still do arranged marriages. Parents may refer to Canadian and Western culture with negative connotation because they just don't like it, obviously. And some parents may encourage their children not to hang around with white kids because it's like they think that this is a way that their children may be maybe fall accustomed to white or Western cultures, so they try to distance their children from being friends with Canadians in general. And other parents may be different. Other parents may be like, no, you should mix with other cultures so you can learn good habits from them. So this has an effect on immigrant children. This is what parents do, but the effect on children are quite insightful. For example, the children, they will realize that they're different from the rest. By the way, for example, 10-year-old Mohammed may not be allowed to go on a sleepover at school, but he may go to school and hear his friend Ben go like, "Oh, I went on a sleepover to Michael's house the other day," but Mohammed will know that, "Oh wait, I'm not allowed to do that." So they learn from their peers and teachers that their culture is very 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 different. Children as they grow up, the children will more likely be drawn to their own culture, but as they grow up, they might envy the way their peers, their Canadian peers or Western peers grow up because of the freedom they have and the restrictions that immigrant children have. And when maturity is reached, usually a lot of the times they convert to Western lifestyle because of the fact that they grow up here and they're free, and so then they decide to inhibit Western culture. Now, why is this so important? This is important because many parents argue that their method is the best. So when Amy Chua came up with her book, a lot of people were arguing like, "Why are you doing this to your children?" Blah blah blah. And this is really, it brings up a debate and discussion, and it's very important for different cultures to know how other cultures raise their children, so they can learn from it or criticize it and better the way they raise their children. And for example, immigrant parents should know how their values and traditions. This is very important for immigrant parents because if they learn about if these issues are discussed, immigrant parents may understand how they raise their child and how this may affect their child's development. Also, like mentioned before, as people learn about other culture and other ways of raising children, it may improve the way they raise their child. And I think the only way to do this is through discussion and debate. Now, finally, my informed opinion, according to my research, I think that parenting styles do have a profound impact on children, on a child's development. The most authentic method for me is authoritative. Although the way one raises a child can depend on their setting and their societal norms, etc., the ideal way of parenting is authoritative. And my research, both primary and secondary, has proved that authoritative parenting has a higher chance of producing more well-rounded children. Again, and thank you for the presentation.